Hello and welcome to Theater's Not Dead with Kiana Alexander. I am your host, Kiana Alexander. For the month of November, we're going to be doing a series called Women Doing the Damn Thing. What is the thing? Theater. Who are the women? These are the people who are making integral changes to the system we've all been working in and the industry that we may be finding was not as perfect as our professors made it out to be. How are they doing it? By disrupting what you think theater has to look like. Whether that's virtual or in person, they're making changes, they're being bold, they're having a good time doing it. I am so excited to have two very special guests on the show today. Both of them I have so much admiration for, so let's talk about them a little bit. AhDream is a free-spirited risk-taker who encouragingly follows her instincts. She is always bringing herself to her work, not to just represent the story well, but to discover something new about herself regardless of the medium. Heather is a dance professor, choreographer, and producer. Her most recent work, The Debate 2.0, is a dance theater piece that she transformed from live theater to virtual theater. I'm excited to talk to them. You're excited to hear from them, and here they are. Yay! Hello and welcome!
Good morning.
Hi.
So, we talked a little bit about 2.0 in your bio, but before we get to any of that, I love to hear people's origin stories. So, how did either of you get started in the performing arts?
Heather, I'm gonna pass it to you.
Okay. Well, I started taking ballet when I was 3. So my story kind of starts there. I've started out in ballet, and then at some point I discovered around age 13 modern dance, and then I did not look back because I realized modern dance was an opportunity for me to really have a unique voice. And a lot of things I was seeing about the ballet world just were rather stifling. So I kind of just went on this journey with modern dance, and I ended up in graduate school at NYU and getting a degree in dance education, and dancing with some really crazy people in New York City who were amazing, postmodern pioneers doing weird stuff, and it was really fun. Got to bark at other people on stage, like just weird stuff, and dance on a ship in the Chelsea piers, Anyway, so, but for me, performing through movement has always been sort of where it's at for me. And I really like the opportunities that modern dance gives because it's an abstract art form that really allows for a lot of interpretations and it's very welcoming to an audience. And then I started discovering theater and how theater and dance theater can be a really interesting partnership and have something more concrete to say. So I teach at UNC Chapel Hill, and I teach the dance courses, but I work a lot with dramatic arts and with the communication department and produce the process series. And so I have an opportunity to work with a lot of people from different genres and kind of bringing all of that together to create, how different voices get heard.
Whew. I have so much I want to talk about, but first I want to hear AhDream's origin story too.
Yeah, I think for me, the first performing art that I was introduced to was singing. So I grew up in the church. So we were in the children's choir, the William Vessels, and that escalated to performing in choir in school, and I was a part of a chamber choir from 8th grade throughout high school. And a couple summers in between there, my grandma had put me in improv class, and I was like, oh, okay, this is kind of cute. Okay. But, I didn't really know what to do with that. And then, in high school, I was a part of there was a drama department, but it wasn't really, unfortunately, it wasn't stable. Like every year we had a different drama teacher. And so I was like getting bits and pieces of the thing, but still wasn't really quite sure what the thing was. And I went to Wesleyan, and they have an awesome theater department, and I didn't get in. And I was, my little performing art heart was broken for a minute. But a senior year, I auditioned for the Vagina Monologues, and I got cast in it. And that really just kind of flipped the head on my end. And that became, that was the bite, the real bite. And then after that, I moved to New York and did some classes at UCB, did some summer intensives at Stella Adler and William Esper. And I haven't really looked back since. And now I'm currently getting my MFA at UNC Chapel Hill in conjunction with Playmakers Repertory Company. And in between all of that, I've also discovered I really enjoy moving my body, and that has opened up different opportunities. I had the privilege to perform with Heather in the debate and the debate 2.0 when it went virtual. And, I'm currently working on some other projects with some other dance theater artists. And so I'm just like, Lord, use me how the creativity wants to flow. I will share it.
First off, so I love origin stories, because what you find is that no artist has been like one thing and stuck to it. Mm-hmm. Like regardless, we all evolve, just like art is always evolving and changing, and what it means to us changes as well. So I love hearing how everyone's like, oh yeah, I started doing A, B, and C, and by the end of it, I'm doing the whole alphabet. It's so fun to hear those stories. I started as a dancer and then was like, oh, I can say words and be on stage. Right. And then that turned into, or I could be off stage and tell people on stage what to do. So that's how I transformed. But yeah, I say all this to say, talking with your body is so much harder than using your words. So I have so much, thus all of my admiration for the two of you in communicating and advocating and never saying the words aloud, using your body to encompass all these themes and concepts and telling people like, stop the patriarchy, but with your arms. So good is the moral of the story. And this kind of brings us to the story of the debate. I want to hear how it got started. Well, no, backtrack. Hi, audience members. This is going to be us telling you what the debate is. And I'm going to pass that back to either of our lovely guests to do that.
Well, I'll start because it's really had multiple iterations. So the way it started originally was as a live performance in February as part of the process series at UNC Chapel Hill. The 19th Amendment Project was developed around this 100th anniversary of this the women's right to vote and the suffrage movement. But what we were doing with the process series is coming together to kind of explore what that really means. Not all women got the right to vote 100 years ago. And so it was more complicated than just like a celebration of 100 years. So that's what the whole, evening-length performance was about, the 19th Amendment Project. Several different artists in different mediums. We had dance theater, which was the debate. We had a musical piece about Sojourner Truth. We had a play. We had a visual arts film piece as well. Anyway, so it started as this live performance, and it was a duet. And then we wanted to take it further into the Women's Theater Festival over the summer, the Fringe Festival. And, everything happened and it went virtual. And so we were like, can we still do this? And what does that mean? And so that was the big transition point. Do we try to transform this piece to continue its life? Because that's what we're going to need to do if we want to see this piece again anytime soon. And what does that mean? Or do we abandon it? And so I had a great partner, Tracy Beersley from the theater department at UNC Chapel Hill, someone who AhDream works with as well as the movement person over there. And really, if I hadn't had a partnership, I don't think I would have done this alone, because I really needed another person to be like, we can do this, or can we do this, or how do we do this? And so, she basically did a lot of dramaturgy for the piece, and we had a lot of conversation about what needs to change in order to keep it going in a virtual life. And then we had Women's Theater Festival come in and say, this is how technically you can make that happen. So it really was all of that coming together to create the next, live streaming version of it. That then went on to a third version of it where we were able to update content because things are changing so rapidly in the landscape of women in politics and what this piece is all about. And even since this last one, things have changed, right? We have a VP-elect who I don't even need to talk about how excited we all are about that. But so things are changing so rapidly. So that's kind of the 3 iterations in a nutshell.
Whew. And they are all so different from each other too, when you really think about like how many aspects and elements change, evolve. Because again, I say this like in every episode, and I'm going to keep saying it. Theater is supposed to evolve and adapt. Anyways, that's my pedestal, and I get on it every week, and I hope no one gets tired of it. So, AhDream, you were a part of it from the very start, correct?
I came in when it shifted to the virtual world.
Okay.
So round 2.
Perfect. So so my question to you is, how do you approach a character as a dance piece? Like, did you solidify a specific persona, or did you kind of change who you were depending on what moment in the dance you were in? Was there a character arc? What was it like developing this as a dancer?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think the first thing that came to mind was like, what story are we telling visually? Because I was very aware of my physical presence as a Black body now entering into this conversation of women's right to vote under the suffragettes, and just being very aware of that history and like how the suffragettes weren't, fighting for me to vote or my ancestors. And so then it's just like, okay, well, what am I representing in this conversation? And I think that is really what grounded me and how I then decided to proceed. And I think talking with Heather and Tracy about, different elements, it then evolved to like, well, maybe I'm not representing what is, but what could be. Because what is a little bleak. And I think to your point of like, were there people there I referenced? There were, like, thinking about Shirley Chisholm, like this isn't the first time a female, let alone a Black woman, has asserted themselves in the political arena to be like, I'm qualified, I have the platform and I can get the thing done. And even I have a friend I went to high school with who is currently in the Congress for Tennessee, and she's the youngest person ever and is a Black woman. And so like thinking about her, and it's just like, you couldn't have told her in high school that she was going to be making history in that way. I mean, you definitely couldn't have told all those other old people sitting there with their lifetime jobs that she was going to be joining the party. And so I think those two women, as someone who I've learned about in school and someone who is very tangible, I can touch, I oscillated between, what would it be like to be in their shoes in this space, in this conversation?
Yeah, I want to add too that the addition of AhDream to the cast was a big shift as well as going. So at the same time we were going from live to a virtual performance, we were going from a duet to a trio. Mm-hmm. And one of the big reasons why we decided to do that is that, again, the landscape was changing and the context changed, because when we first presented it live, there was the context of a shared program where there was a lot of content that was addressing what it was like for Black women during the suffragette movement. So we felt like we were part of the conversation, but taken out of that context, we missed that piece wasn't as obvious in the debate. Mm-hmm. So we really felt like, representation is so important in theater. Casting is so important in theater. Especially in dance too, your body is what speaks, and your body represents. And so who we put in the role matters. So we felt like it was really important to introduce a woman of color as a really important figure in this piece, so that there was that representation. And I think working with AhDream was so nice, because she was also coming to it as an actor too. And so she has that, like, let's think about like what this character means and what they're doing. And so we had all of those conversations because that matters, right? And so I think that she was such a wonderful, besides being just a lovely person, she was such a wonderful addition to our cast because she brought this perspective. And I have to give a little story too about this. And I haven't had a chance to tell AhDream this yet. I know. I meant to text you and then I was just like, life happened. So I talked to a class, a dance class at NC State. I did sort of a guest lecture about the debate, about this piece. And we were talking about it. They watched it and they were talking about it. And there was this young woman, African-American woman, and she said that it was so important for her to see AhDream and her role up there on this virtual platform that she watched. And it was very moving for her to see someone like her up there. And so just, having that response from sort of this next generation of performers coming up, being like, yes, this is important. You're welcome here, and this needs to happen. So anyway, I just wanted to share that was kind of a neat story.
I also agree with both of what you're saying regarding like representation and telling the narrative of what's really happening here. Because when you think about the suffragette movement, when you think about the election in 2016, all of these major political advocation moments for women, somehow women of color don't get put in the narrative, which is so interesting to me because they were such a cornerstone of all of that. Like the suffragette movement and Ida B. Wells, like to me, they are synonymous, and not enough people, in my opinion, know about her and what she did. And like Hillary Clinton got so much clout for being the presidential candidate. And in my mind, I always thought, are we forgetting our girl Shirley? Because back in the day, Shirley was running it too. So, yes, to making sure that narrative is being told, because Black and brown bodies have always been a part of our political system, no matter how much some people try to stop them from being a part of the political system. And thank you to whoever made the executive decision to bring AhDream in, because yes, to black and brown bodies saying the narrative and title drop, doing the damn thing.
Yeah, and I just want to, I guess, call out or distinguish too, like the executive decision to not just bring on a woman of color, but to bring on a Black woman, because Marissa, who was also a part of the project, if my memory serves me correctly, identifies as a woman of color, and I think it's really easy to forget that even within women of color or woman of color or people of color, like there's still all these different variances, and there are people of color who have the privilege to pass for white, and so then they still don't have to deal with some of the things versus like, there's no passing with this, there's no mistaking. I mean, even if I wasn't in the sun, there's still some things that you just kind of like, no, she's a Black woman. And so I think that's really important. And I think just even hearing the story that you were sharing, Heather, that, had I been someone else, I don't know if that story would have rang true, or even like if I had been a dark-skinned woman, like what that would have, elicited for people. And so, yeah, I just wanted to drop that in.
Oh, no, you're totally right. I'm sorry, Heather, did I cut you off?
Oh, no, I wanted to follow up on that, originally we had cast a white woman and a Filipino woman. And those were our two duets, the two dancers for the duet in the live piece. And then when we shifted, we added in AhDream, and specifically we wanted that African American voice, because it is a unique voice. It's not, it's not monolithic, right? We don't want to say, yes, all, women of color, but we wanted to show also that there are, all different voices. There's all different identities that each person inhabits as well, So we wanted to show the complexity, and that's what I love about modern dance, because here's my plug for modern dance, because the abstract nature, I know, the professor in me goes on about, the beauty of modern dance. But it is that sort of abstract nature that allows for multiple things to coexist, multiple truths to coexist. So we had many discussions about, we didn't want, each dancer in the piece to have this sort of one-to-one relationship. This represents so-and-so. Like AhDream was saying, she had many influences into who she was, and sort of who she was channeling at the moment, I think, changed throughout the piece. There's a part where AOC has a voiceover, and that has a very specific embodiment, I think, that AhDream responded to, versus maybe different times in it where she was maybe thinking of other people. And so the point being is that we all have multiple influences and have multiple voices within us, and we didn't want it to be like, okay, this dancer is this person, that dancer is that person. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of reiterate that too.
And also, so for people who have not seen the Debate 2.0 when it was streamed live, one, I'm so sorry you missed that opportunity, because it was bomb. There was a talk back afterwards. Someone was moderating it. She was kind of cute. I don't know. It was me. It's a self-plug. But I do encourage people to see the debate, because what we're talking about makes me love the piece even more now. Like, I already liked it. I already thought it was brilliant in the incorporation of past political propaganda to present day propaganda, and now that love has been amplified by so much just by this conversation alone, and acknowledging the Black narrative in politics and acknowledging the female narrative in politics. Yes to all of that. Which brings me to our next question. the piece itself, the debate 2.0, talks about, or I guess we can still say talks about. I've struggled with that because I'm like, technically we're not speaking. Anyways, this dichotomy of women being feminine in the roles they play in this world, but having to pretend or having to put on masculine traits in order to be successful. Like, that's what I pulled out of it when I watched the debate. And I just was curious of how you wanted the debate to speak to that theme. Was that an intentional theme, or did it just kind of evolve out of the piece? How intentional? So one, how intentional was it? And two, how do you feel about that concept of women having to be more masculine to get along in this world?
If we go back to sort of the origin story of the piece, originally, way back when we started thinking about the live version, we were going to cast a man in the duet. And honestly, no one wanted that role because we were saying some things, we were exposing some truths, I think, about this sort of often male way of being in politics that can be, that a lot of us have had very negative experiences with, right? And so we reached out to some really lovely men and they didn't want it. So understandable. So they didn't want to be vilified, right? And so by default, we were like, okay, well then what does it mean if we cast a woman in that role? And how can we still speak to this gender divide in politics? So one thing we did, and so we just kind of ran with that. We kind of abandoned that idea early on then and just kind of ran with that. And I'm so glad we did, because I feel like, so many women in politics, and I'm going to say mostly white women in politics, are, I think, more egregious at this, is that they take on those male roles to blend in and to fit in. And so that's something we wanted to talk about. So at one point in the debate, we have a costume change, and that's the way we handled that. In that sort of all three women are wearing the same neutral costume in the beginning. And I described it to them when we were talking about it as sort of like these lumps of clay, like molding themselves into what they want to be. And then they have this costume change where they all put on dresses, to kind of emphasize that stereotypical female role. But one of them also puts on a bright red tie. And she is the one that sort of is taking on that role of taking up space. She has more physical space in her room that she gets to take up, whereas the other two women are really confined literally to boxes in a corner a lot of the time. And so what we were saying with that, I feel like, is that with that character, like this, putting on this mask of these, aligning with these men in politics to get somewhere. And we see that a lot with the current administration. It's almost more heartbreaking when you see a woman doing that than when you see a man doing that, I think. Because it's like you feel abandoned, right? So yeah, and I'm interested to hear what AhDream thinks of that. So we're talking about Sarah's role. I guess she's the dancer that was playing that, and she had mixed feelings about playing that as well. But it was a really interesting discussion for all of us to have, I think. So yeah, I'll turn it over to AhDream.
Yeah. So a lot of images were just flashing through my head as y'all were talking, but I think the first thing that came to my mind is this picture of Kamala that's been going around of like a silhouette, I think, of Ruby Bridges, and then her in this pantsuit. And then I saw Hillary in a pantsuit, and then I saw ALC in a pantsuit, and I saw my friend London in a pantsuit, and this notion that, like, I feel like Senator Maxine, like, she would have on a skirt. And then I'm just like, well, is it a generational thing? And well, then why do pants have to be synonymous with men? And so, like, all of this is like going through my head, and is that like a way of putting on a more masculine, like how you dress, but people still wear heels, or like, just a little bit of makeup, but is that a way of like toning down your femininity? And yeah, I think to Heather's point, it is more disheartening when you experience that type of behavior from a woman. But I think it's so interesting that the men who were asked to do it automatically saw those qualities as villainous. Mm-hmm. So it's just like, so it's not that men aren't aware of how that behavior is trash. It's just they just choose not to speak up, or they choose not to condemn it. Everybody's aware of the game, and everybody just allows it to keep going. And then the note about the boxes, what came up for me was like, even this conversation about theater not being dead and shifting to a virtual platform, and now we are literally confined to these Zoom boxes. And so, like, what does that mean? And with a piece that I recently directed, and with this piece that I'm in production for, there's been a really big emphasis on being aware of the space outside of the Zoom box. And how do you invite the audience into the greater space so that they don't feel confined to just this 5x7, or, this 10x14, or even just like the laptop computer screen. Yeah, so those are just some off the cuff freestyle thoughts. But I think the future of theater, particularly on this platform, relies on how do we literally keep thinking outside of the box, because that's really going to be the only way to keep people's attention and keep people engaged, especially when there's so much content now available. I mean, there was already social media content and news content, but now, I mean, you can watch some of your favorite artists do a reading of a show in New York that you wouldn't have, if you were in the middle of Memphis or Nebraska, you wouldn't have been able, if you didn't have the financial means to get to New York to see the show, or you had a schedule conflict while the show was running and you weren't able to make it, that so many more doors are now open. But then, like, now you have that and 15 other shows that you want to watch, Yes.
Last week, AhDream, you're so brilliant, and that's all.
Okay.
One of the conversations we had last week was about how virtual theater has made performing art more accessible to people. Because like you mentioned, people with financial or like time accessibility needs. There are people who, like, sitting in a dark theater for 2 hours is just not possible for them, given whatever circumstances they may have in their life. Like, virtual theater's merit is its accessibility to people. And you are also right in that more accessibility leads to so much more content for the consumer, because everything is now accessible. So an interesting challenge to all of the creatives out there on how do you stand out among your colleagues? How do you keep your viewers interested and engaged after they just stared at a computer for 7 hours for work, and now you're asking them to stare at a computer for 2 more hours after work? Like, how do you balance those things?
Yeah.
But before we get into more future talk, because, it's coming, this idea of us not wanting to play the villain, us not wanting to embody these traits and these behaviors we view as negative. I do not remember who I said this to. So apologies to whoever that person was if you were watching this episode. Hey, friend! How sometimes you cannot be the focus. And if that means that to tell someone's story, you now have to play a role you may not identify with, you may not share the same mentality with. But, and this was specifically in the talks of works done by Black playwrights. And the role in question was a bigoted role, a racist role. And this white man did not want to play this racist role. And we said, well, is this Black narrative supposed to be about you and how you feel about it?
Well,
and he didn't really have a response other than, well, the role makes me uncomfortable. The role makes everyone uncomfortable. Like, people like that role do every single day. So again, I ask you, is it your place to now invalidate the experience of the people that have been victimized by this character? At the end of the day, he didn't take the role. But, like, it was a conversation that needed to be had. So the fact that it's happening in this piece as well for the debate, that you couldn't find someone to play a role that had Trumpisms in it. And I'll say it, Trumpisms, but that's so fascinating to me because, again, I would ask those same male dancers, well, is it your story to say no to a man playing that part?
I think it's an excellent point. Yeah. And I think Sarah, I'm so happy that it worked out the way it did. She
nailed it.
Really took on that role so nicely. And we had some great discussions about it as well, because it was, I mean, I think it was part of, you know, anytime you play a role, it's a part of your own growth process too. And she was so open to do that and to experience and embrace that uncomfortableness of it. But, you know, she was also able to say, you know what, I felt like I had all this freedom. It was amazing. And for her also, I mean, she has experienced not having, you know, not being able to take up space because she's a woman. So she could understand it in that respect. That she's like, yeah, it must be nice to have that much space to take up, right? But she's like, at the same time, I felt so guilty because me taking up space meant it was allowing less space for others. And that was not something, you know, that was the uncomfortable part of it.
But that's the key right there. I just want to say, like, that's the real root of empathy, you know, like the ability to be like, hold up, time out, let me put myself in the other person's shoes, you know, because I mean, sympathy is nice, like, oh, I feel bad, but like, I don't need you to feel bad. I need you to like not invalidate my experience and really consider what it could be like, you know, if this was your day-to-day life. Because I think that's really what has people transform and change, not just like, oh man, that's unfortunate. You know?
And I think that's what art does for us too, especially like performance. Performance allows the audience to be able to sit with, you know, what it must be like to be that character. Like, you know, a good actor or dancer is going to draw you into that and be able for you to have, I feel like with this piece, there's often this visceral response to it. Like, you know, some of the stuff that the dancers are just, their uncomfortableness or their struggles become palpable. Like you can feel it. And I think that's how art helps us to understand and to have that empathy, right? Rather than sympathy.
Yes. So there's this, speaking of visuals? No, I don't like that transition at all. Anyways, next question. There are these red boxes we see in the performer's physical space during the debate, and some performers do different things with their boxes depending on which character they are playing. I'm trying to not give spoilers, but at this point, I don't know how well of a job I'm doing. But yeah, so you have these huge red boxes that are in each performer's space that they may or may not be confined in. One, what was the thought behind the boxes? And two, specifically for AhDream, how did the box play contribute to your character arc and to the mentality you had approaching the role?
Yeah, I think so. From my understanding, like the boxes were a part of the original iteration of the debate, and initially, instead of being on the wall, were on the floor. And so you had this visual of these two women kind of meticulously laying down this tape to create a box, and boxes within boxes, actually. And I think Heather did a great job of translating that same sentiment in a COVID, worlds where the dancers could still have their boxes and be in separate rooms-esque, and still be safe. And so I think for me, AhDream, I hate being put in boxes. I'm just like, you don't know me well enough to put me in a box. And I love keeping people on their toes. So, okay, go ahead, put me in a box. Watch me pivot. So to have that to play with, I was really excited about. And as far as it influencing my character's arc, I think that was actually something that was developed in the conversation, because it didn't exist before. It didn't exist in the live version. And when talking with Heather and Tracy, what really started coming up for me is what I was saying earlier. Is like, I don't think who my character represents, she does not exist. She is really standing in what could be, but it's going to take something. Like, it's not enough for her to just want it. Like, we all have to kind of get on the page of like, okay, the system that we have isn't working. And even if we were to rebuild it, it's not functional. We've tried different leaders, different political parties in the same role. And, if you look at the data, the results aren't too much different. If you really look at people's political platforms and what they stand for, I mean, case in point, say what you will, but Mr. Trump on paper was a Democrat before he ran as a Republican. You know what I'm saying? So, but yeah, and then I think for the third iteration of it, we just got to like take it to a higher level of like, oh, okay, we got a little momentum. And like this doesn't even have to be like a United States conversation. This could be a global conversation. And I think that's the energy that the debate 2.0 really reckoned for me, or brought up for me. And I think even in, watching the world response to our delayed presidential election results, you really get the sense of like that this decision isn't just affecting the citizens of this country, but it's going to have a global impact.
Yes, because I think kind of what you're speaking to, no matter what organization, what industry, what country you were talking about, women, more times than not, are underestimated, are put in boxes, are viewed less than, and having representation and having pieces like the debate kind of break that narrative of us not out here creating and running and leading and dismantling. Yes to all of that, all the time, every day, all day. We've been talking about this, but I want to just make it an official question. How do we feel about the female representation nowadays, like the current state of female representation?
I wanted to say one more thing about the boxes.
Box away, box away.
Yeah. I think it became really important for us to think about how we dismantle those boxes. But at the end of the piece, like and that changed over time too. And with this last iteration, it really became, it developed into this, we introduced AOC's speech on the floor where she is calling out this disrespectful language from a fellow politician. And we played that, and that is what was sort of the impetus for AhDream's character to literally pull down and dismantle her box and ball it up and offer it up to say, we need something new. So we used that, and we kind of pushed that. And we also, I feel like with that, and I don't know as we've really talked about this, AhDream, but like I felt like in that last like performance of it, you really allowed those words to inform your movement and just went with it. And we're like, I am so done. I am taking it down. And I feel like we were sort of at that critical point in our country where everything, it's coming to a head, right? And so many of us are just done. We're done with it. We're done with the box, right? So anyway, I just want to put that out there because I think that was important.
Oh, it is.
It's so important, yeah. Okay.
But
back to your question.
Yeah, and it feels like, I don't know if anyone else is keeping up with the current political state of things, but it feels like there is a woman out here breaking some boxes. So when we originally, even like last week, when we made these interview questions for you all, and one of the questions was, what is the current state of female representation? We did not have a VP-elect that looks a little different than what they usually do. It's Kamala Harris. So the question is the same, but I think the conversation is going to be drastically different than what it would have been last week, of what representation for women, and specifically Black women, what is that like now?
Yeah. I think with our VP elect, especially, what I love is that, yes, it's like a win for Black women, but I think, to the conversation point that we were having earlier about like there are women who embody multiple identities, Asian American women and Indian women, and like just women, period, like that she represents so many firsts, that like all those people who may have had ambition and drive and dreams, it's like, oh wait, now we have like somebody tangible. It is real now. And on the one hand, I'm very hopeful about what's possible, what's to come. And on the other hand, maybe 1% skepticism of, people are complacent. Like, okay, we got one. Our work is done. Everybody go home, kick your feet up. And
we did it.
Yeah, we did it. And the reality is, like, women are, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, like 51% of the population. And that is not reflective in the Senate or the House, the judicial branch, you know what I'm saying? And so, or, if we're going to bring it back to the performing arts, like, yes, there are female dancers. Yes, there are some female professors. And I think from a teaching standpoint, there might be more women than men. But when you get to people who are making executive decision, artistic directors, executive directors, producers, where are the women? Let alone women of color, let alone Black women. And that's the system I'm trying to bust up. That's where I'm really engaging as a measure of success, because until there's representation at that level, I mean, we over here talking sweet nothings. That's really what we're doing. It's like, oh, what's up, pretty mama? It's like, no, I want to hear that.
And because I hate quoting or referencing pop culture stuff, but I do believe one of the things that made Hamilton so successful was how inclusive it was and how deliberately they were in casting people of all denominations, of a whole slew of different backgrounds to play roles that were traditionally very, like, white. And I say roles because they are based off of real people who were white. So people recognize that they like folks of color on stage, right? Oh, look how cool Hamilton is. We have immigrants playing, guess what? Immigrants. So going back to that idea of we recognize these things and we know them in the back of our minds to be true, but we don't speak up. We don't put in the effort to continue that work, right? The thought is slowly disintegrating in my mind as I say it aloud.
Tag team me. I'm ready. I got a thought. Thanks. I was in New York when Hamilton dropped, and I was taking dance classes at the time. And I specifically remember a young woman in my class being upset that the casting breakdown was just like non-white people. And she was just like, I mean, that's not fair. And, A, B, C, and D. And I was just like thinking to myself, every other Broadway show though, white, Caucasian woman, what's the word they like to use? Ethnically ambiguous. Like, I'm just like, the one show, the one, you upset? And even, if we look at the Broadway shows, I mean, okay, Hamilton, Color Purple, Eclipse, Lion King, of course, Lion King, Chicago, depends. I've seen Chicago with a Black Roxy, a Black Mama Morton, and Velma. So I mean, but depends on who's in that night, But I mean, I can count on maybe two hands. I mean, Motown, I can count on two hands the Broadway shows. But people like for Hamilton were really upset, and I was just like, wow. Imagine what that's like for every other show, like wanting to be the star in, I don't know, the Harry Potter movie, the Harry Potter show, or, all these television shows that come out, like the romantic rom-coms. It's just like, I'm a real hopeless romantic. And sometimes I've done a many of things that are quite hilarious, quite hilarious. But it's just like, you don't get to see people of color just being. You don't get to see them as the lead. You don't get to see them as the love interest. Like, I want to see like a full-size figured man and woman fall in love. That's not, like, we don't even get to see that if we're gonna just talk about, like.
And we could talk about shape bias, like body shape bias, all day, because it's across the board.
That's a whole episode.
It's everywhere. Oh, we'll have you back. It'll be fine. But yeah, because I know we're winding down on the episode, so I also, hello background. So I also want to kind of, particularly for Heather, because she had kind of talked about this earlier. As a theater artist, how has the switch to virtual uprooted your career, or changed it, or transformed it? Like, because theater people still have to make money. Fun fact, we did not get free food when all of our tours and shows and productions got shut down. So how you managing?
Well, I mean, the big buzzword of the year is pivot, right? We all have to pivot, and we have to figure out new ways. And, what I've always embraced about my art form is that I like obstacles. Like, that's the good stuff. That's what gives me something to work with, right? So I feel like this, what could be seen as an obstacle, it's creating a whole new genre, really. And we've had this, we had this discussion when we were live streaming this show, and then we captured it, and then just, it's on video on demand now. And so we're like, well, where is that in terms of like what it is? What is it? I mean, I want to be really clear that also that it's not a dance film, because that's another genre. Like, dance film is a whole genre in and of itself. And I have lots of colleagues that make amazing dance films. I don't make dance films. Like, that's not what I do. I love watching them. I love teaching about them, but I don't make dance films. That's not my skill set. But live streaming performance is yet another beast. And I think we're starting to, like, through Women's Theater Festival and like organizations like this, we're starting to figure out what that means and starting to define it, and let it evolve, though, and see what it means, and see how we can, there are some things that even when we will someday go back to live theater. When we do, I think this still has a place, and if for nothing else, then equity. Like, people get to see it, right? And you can make it very reasonably priced as well, so that people can see it and its access. Before all this, like, one of the genres I work in also is site-specific performance. And so, and one of the reasons for that is equitability. Like, anyone can come to the performance. Anyone walking by can be an audience member. And so there's a beauty in that, and there's a democracy in that, like, at the true sense of democracy, not what we have evolved to think of as democracy at this point. But so that's what I'm hopeful about, and that's what I'm excited about. And technology is at a place where we can keep up with that. We can start to figure out, okay, how do all of these new things, how are they going to develop? And how are our tech folks going to, be there to support us and come up with ideas, and we'll create it together.
Yes, to all of that. Like, I always say the new Zoom update was made with, like, people who are using that technology, that software, outside of what it was originally made for. Mm-hmm. Like, that new update where we can change the boxes around, where we can play with more of what the audience sees through the Zoom call. All of that, I vote, is for all these beautiful adaptive creators who said, we're going to use this Zoomware to make art. And that's what I'm going to think it is. So thank you, Zoom. AhDream, how has your career and student life been affected as, the whole world shut down?
Yes, honestly, um, Zoom and technology has provided a level of opportunities for myself that I don't think would have been possible otherwise. And it's like this bittersweet, you know, um, space to be in because my program is connected to a repertory theater and the theater's closed. And so at a program where 75% of my program is performance based and the source of performance is closed, it's like, okay, what does that mean for my education? And fortunately, since July, June, I've had the opportunity and the privilege and the blessing to continue to work with artists in the Triangle and outside, from dance theater with Heather to acting and doing Shakespeare. And fortunately, Key, I would say about 75% of those projects I've worked on with you. So it's been an awesome opportunity to still be able to, connect with other artists and, figure out how to navigate different personalities and different work styles and learn from different people about how to approach the work, and put on these different hats of actor, dancer, director, and really just be stretching myself as an artist in the midst of stretching myself as a human being, in this current world and climate that we live in. And so for me, it has been a blessing. And I'm excited to see, what continues to come from it. And I'm just also very aware that like there's so many opportunities that if we were not in a COVID world, I just wouldn't have been able to do because of the rigor of my program or because of where I'm physically located. And so it's been a game changer.
Yes. Because like right now we are not in the same room and none of us had to get into a car to drive to have this meeting. No one, like, there's just so many things that have changed how we connect to people, how we talk to people, how we make things with people. I vote we keep doing stuff like this even after the theaters open back up, because there's the pros outweigh the cons, at least for me in my experience. So I vote we keep on trucking with this whole virtual nonsense. We are now at the time where I ask the two of you, hey, got any stuff, any projects, anything you want to shout out? I see a hand.
I have something. So I am currently in production for it in pre-COVID world. It'd be called the Playmakers Ground Floor, and it's basically like a black box theater, more intimate type show. And this one that we're doing was actually written for my cohort, my classmates and I, by Kevin Vasseur, and it's called SpacePlusTime. It was written specifically for Zoom, which I think is a important distinction with, all the different types of work that's been being put on the platform. Trying to convert a piece that was written for stage on Zoom versus watching a piece that was written for the platform. So this one was written for the platform. It will be live streamed. So if somebody passes out or trips on something, y'all gonna see it in the moment. In the shows, there'll be 3 shows: Friday, November 20th at 7:30 Eastern Standard, Saturday, November 21st at 2 o'clock, Saturday, November 21st at 7:30. And I will share the Zoom link with you, Key, and feel free to drop it in the description. And it is free 99. So just come get yourself a good laugh and hang out with us.
And Heather, do you have anything that you want the world to know about?
Yeah, so the Debate 2.0 is on video on demand, Vimeo on demand, and he's going to provide that information, I guess, right there. All right. Yeah, so you can rent it anytime. I'm also starting to really think about how to use this as an educational tool. So, like as a dance educator, and then also just in the theater world. So I'm going to be holding some workshops through Women's Theater Festival on the very next day after a Dreams piece. So Sunday, November 22nd. There are going to be two workshops from 11 to 1. I'm going to talk about adapting live theater to a virtual platform and using the Debate 2.0 as sort of a starting point of like how we did that and what's possible. And then from 2 to 4 on the same day, I'm going to talk about virtual performance as social activism. And again, using the Debate 2.0 as an example, and also kind of gearing some of it towards educators as well. So talking about like how we can use this piece or how we can use these concepts in lesson planning for the spring, because a lot of us are wrapping up our fall semesters and getting ready for the spring already. So.
All right. Well, if no one knew what they were doing for the last weekend in November, you're welcome. You get a laugh, get in the right mood to learn about some activism the very next day. Bam. Figured it out. So check out all those links. They will be down below. I'm kind of sad that this conversation is ending. I'm a wee bit sad, but we also can't make this episode 5 hours long. So we're going to wrap it up here. Thank you both, AhDream and Heather, for your words and your insight and your artistry and your time and your talents. The list could keep going on, but I'm going to stop myself here. Wow.
So
Anyways.
Yeah. Thank you.
Guys. Okay. Whew. So this has been Theater's Not Dead. Again, all November, we're going to continue talking to women doing the damn thing. What's the thing? Dismantling the patriarchy. I said it aloud. You're welcome. Be sure to follow TND and all the things. We have a Twitter. We have a Instagram. Make sure you are liking, subscribing, and clicking the cute little bell so that you can get notifications when we go live and when we have other fun content for you to view. I think that covers everything. I'm going to assume my producer is giving me the go-ahead. Hey everybody, this is Theater Not Dead with Kiana Alexander. I'm Kiana Alexander saying, psst, Theater's not dead. Bye everybody.